He showed up every day, unnoticed. A quiet man with a mop in his hands and dignity in his heart. To most, he was just the janitor, invisible, unimportant. But what they didn't see was the weight he carried, and the secret he kept locked away. One arrogant decision, one moment of humiliation would set everything in motion. The powerful man who dismissed him thought it was just another ordinary day. But it wasn't. Behind those tired eyes was a plan no one could have imagined. One that would shake the walls of the very empire that tried to silence him. The question is, when the truth comes out, who will really be left standing? For years, Marcus was the man who blended into the background. He swept the same floors, polished the same marble, and greeted the same faces who barely acknowledged he existed. A black janitor in one of the city's most powerful corporations, his presence was routine, almost invisible. But Marcus carried himself with quiet pride. He wasn't just working for a paycheck. He was building something, piece by piece, in silence. Few ever wondered about the mind behind the uniform, there were dreams behind the tired smile. Each morning, he rose before the sun, laced his worn shoes, and stepped into a world that treated him as if he didn't matter. The executives walked past him with sharp suits and sharper words, yet Marcus never faltered. He listened, he observed, and he waited. What they dismissed as humility was something deeper, a resilience forged by years of being underestimated. But beneath that calm exterior, there was more than anyone suspected. Files neatly tucked away at home, numbers carefully aligned, and plans laid brick by brick. Marcus wasn't just a janitor, he was a man with a vision, a plan that stretched far beyond those polished floors. And then came the day everything changed. A single encounter, fueled by arrogance and prejudice, would not only strip Marcus of the job he had given years to, it would ignite the spark that revealed who he truly was. The storm was coming, and no one in that towering building saw it approaching. The breaking point came on a Monday morning, a day that began like any other. Marcus pushed open the heavy glass doors, his hands rough from years of work, his heart steady. The executives filed in as usual, too busy to notice the man who made their world shine. But the CEO noticed, not Marcus himself, but the mere fact of him. Why is he still here? The words echoed across the lobby. Sharp, cold, dismissive. The arrogant tone cut deeper than any insult. To the CEO, Marcus wasn't a man. He was a problem, a presence unworthy of such polished floors. That morning, Marcus was summoned to the office. Not for recognition, not for a raise, but for humiliation. Sitting across from a desk worth more than Marcus earned in a year, the CEO didn't mince words. "We don't need you anymore. Pack your things." No explanation, no gratitude, just dismissal wrapped in arrogance. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the city outside. Marcus sat there, stunned but calm. He didn't plead. He didn't protest. He simply nodded, stood up, and walked out. To the CEO, it was just another decision. To Marcus, it was the spark that lit a fire years in the making. But the injustice didn't stop there. Whispers spread through the building like wildfire. "Did you hear? The janitor's gone." Some laughed, others shrugged, but not one person asked why. It was as if Marcus had never existed. That was the cruelty. Not just the firing, but the erasure. Walking out of that building with his box of belongings, Marcus felt the weight of generations pressing on his shoulders. He had endured insults, subtle glances, and moments where silence spoke louder than words. He had swallowed it all. But this time was different. This time, the arrogance of one man had drawn a line he could no longer ignore. At home, the files were waiting. Years of calculations, research, and silent planning. While the world dismissed him as just another janitor, Marcus had been quietly building something far bigger than the company that cast him aside. He opened the folders, ran his fingers across the numbers, and felt the calm assurance of someone who knew the storm was turning in his favor. Meanwhile, inside the company, the CEO celebrated his own decision. He bragged about cutting costs, about streamlining, unaware that his arrogance had planted the seed of his downfall. He didn't know the man he fired had been listening all along, absorbing secrets, observing patterns, piecing together truths no one dared to see. The tension grew. Marcus wasn't just hurt, he was ready. Ready to step into the light, ready to reveal that the man they dismissed as nothing had the power to turn everything upside down. But not yet. Timing was everything. For now, he waited, holding his silence like a weapon, letting the arrogance of others blind them to what was coming. Because in the end, Marcus knew something they didn't. The floors he cleaned had given him more than a paycheck. They had given him access, knowledge, and perspective. And when the moment came, it wouldn't just be about revenge. It would be about justice, dignity, and proving once and for all that the man they called invisible was the one they should have feared all along. And as night fell over the city, Marcus closed his folders, leaned back in his chair, and whispered to himself, "They'll never see it coming." The boardroom was buzzing, a place Marcus had once entered only to clean the tables after the powerful were gone. But this time, he wasn't carrying a mop. He was carrying the truth. The CEO sat smugly at the head of the table, surrounded by executives who nodded at every word he spoke. He boasted about efficiency, about profits, about the future of the company. He never once mentioned the man he had fired, the one he had humiliated. To him, Marcus was gone, forgotten. But then the screen lit up. Documents, charts, financial reports, data only an insider could have gathered. Gasps filled the room. Hidden debts, corrupt practices, inflated profits, everything laid bare in black and white. The empire the CEO bragged about was nothing more than a house of cards, and Marcus was the one pulling it down. The CEO's face drained of color. He stood, barking orders, demanding to know who had leaked the information. But before anyone could move, Marcus's voice echoed through the speakers. Calm, steady, powerful. You fired me because you thought I was nothing. But I was watching. I was listening. And today, the world will know the truth. The silence that followed was heavier than any insult Marcus had ever endured. Years of invisibility had led to this moment. The janitor they dismissed now held the fate of the company in his hands. Phones buzzed, screens flashed. News outlets were already picking up the story. The empire was collapsing in real time. And all the CEO could do was watch as the man he underestimated tore down the walls around him. For Marcus, it wasn't just revenge. It was vindication. Every insult, every slight, every moment of being ignored had built to this point. He had carried the weight of injustice for too long. And now the burden was lifted, crashing down instead on the shoulders of the man who thought himself untouchable. And as the boardroom erupted in chaos, Marcus whispered the words that cut deeper than any headline. You erased me, but I was always here. The company that once erased Marcus could no longer ignore him. Within days, headlines filled the news. CEO exposed in 50B scandal. Executives scrambled, investors fled, and the man who believed himself untouchable was forced to step down, in disgrace. The empire had crumbled, not by the hands of another billionaire, but by the janitor he thought invisible. For Marcus, it wasn't about money or revenge. It was about dignity, about proving that worth is not defined by a uniform, a paycheck, or the arrogance of those in power. He walked away with his head high, no longer the man in the shadows, but the man who reminded the world that silence does not mean weakness. But Marcus's story is more than one man's triumph. It is a mirror. How many times have voices been dismissed because of the color of their skin? How many talents buried? How many dreams delayed because society chose not to see them? His fight wasn't only against a CEO. It was against a system that thrives on underestimation and prejudice. And that's the uncomfortable truth. Racism doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers through boardrooms, through hiring decisions, through everyday arrogance that strips people of their humanity. Marcus's story is fiction inspired by reality, but the reality is happening every day, in ways too many prefer to ignore. So ask yourself, how many more Marcuses are out there, walking into workplaces where their brilliance is unseen, their value dismissed? How many more empires are built on the backs of people who are never given credit for the weight they carry? His story ends with justice, but the larger story, our story, continues. And it's up to us to decide, will we keep turning away? Or will we finally recognize the power, the dignity, and the humanity in those the world too often tries to erase?